Welcome to the Inspiring Humans podcast. We are so happy to have you listening. My name is Stephanie Woolard, and this podcast is a platform to showcase the incredible human spirit. On this podcast, I'll be interviewing people from all over the world and all walks of life who will be sharing with us their personal dreams and their dreams for the future. I believe that through coming together and creating community, incredible things are possible. In fact, anything is possible. And I hope that this podcast is a launch pad for creating the new world that we want to see, that will have humanity free, thriving, and living in their full self-expression. Today on the Inspiring Humans podcast, we have Nick Bartlett, who is an awesome friend of mine, but also one of the smartest business minds that I have ever met. So it's an absolute privilege to have you on today, Nick, and to be chatting to you and taking a bit of a deeper dive into what you're working on and what's led you to this point.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Steph. I can't wait to have a chat.
So Nick is one of those incredible entrepreneurs that has, comes up with these ideas that are informed by the market and the need, and workshops these products, and somehow has seemed to have like success after success, among, I'm sure, some challenges and failures. But I'd love to just ask you, what are you working on at the moment?
So it was January 10th last year. We were living in Slovenia. And anyway, we got a flight out to New Zealand, where I'm from. So me and my wife and my two kids are twins. And so January 2020, pretty good timing. Had no idea what was coming. But next thing you know, we're in lockdown, and our flights have been cancelled that would have taken us back to Slovenia. So in effect, we kind of relocated country, basically as far away from Slovenia as you can get, accidentally, which has turned out to be an amazing thing. So it's been great. But along the way, some opportunities came, and I was really conscious of the fact that the way I put it was the deck of cards was going to be reshuffled. If you think of the world as a deck of cards, that it's just going to be like all muddled up and look completely different. And you could analyze it to death and try and figure out the minutiae of it, or you could just kind of go, more people are going to work from home. People are going to want more pot plants. You could just go real simple, because who could have predicted the markets going crazy as they did and everything else? So I just got to kind of keep it general. So anyway, during lockdown, I had some ideas. I launched one of those ideas as an e-commerce company, which was just selling hair clippers and stuff. So that's getacut.co.nz. And my wife runs that now. It's done about $1 million worth of turnover within New Zealand in its first year. So it's been quite a good little business. But a few months later, I was having problems getting refunds for my flights that I bought, that we're trying to get home. We couldn't buy these tickets to get back. They kept getting cancelled. And the first flight was booked through Expedia, and they wouldn't give me my money back. So I went through what's known as a credit card chargeback process, because that was the only way. And that's where your bank basically reverses a transaction that happened on either Mastercard or Visa. And so I did that process. I filled in some forms. It took about 3 weeks, and I got my money back, which was great. But I noticed that no one else seemed to be doing it. I seemed to be the only person who had done it, and I thought that was strange, because it's not that hard. And lots of people were complaining about not getting their money back from Air New Zealand and other airlines and travel agents and stuff. So it just seemed strange. And the media was all on about this every other day of the week, about how this was happening. But no one in the media was saying, well, just do a chargeback. So anyway, I kind of got the gears working, spinning, and I was like, what if we just made this process? But what if we made one process in software that every bank in the world could use, right? Because every bank in the world's got their own process for this, even though they all link back to the same rules from Mastercard and or Visa. It doesn't make sense they've all got their own one when it's just basically the same thing. And if you did one, you could make it really good, really easy, much better. So that's kind of the first idea. But I realized I didn't really know anything about chargebacks. So basically did what I encourage any good entrepreneur to do. And that is, we went to market with absolutely no product and no idea what we were doing. So that's it. But that's the key, right? We wanted to become really smart about and informed about chargebacks in the quickest amount of time, and not worry about, we had some theses and some stuff like that, but we just wanted to get good at something quickly. So we weren't knobs. I gathered some people together from across the globe, actually. New Zealand, Australia, Slovenia, UK. We went to market, and we just got absolutely smashed with people wanting us to help them do a chargeback. So the business was called Refund Club. And basically we said to people, look, if you need a refund, come to us and we'll help you. So did that and got like 400. We did about 400 applications for people. We got back a few $100,000 for them, and learned all the ins and outs of the system. So kind of got good really, really quickly. The problem was, as we got good at it, the demand started to decrease. So, okay. And that was because of a lot to do with the demand was very travel related and stuff. And we found it difficult to branch out of travel because the amounts for non-travel related chargeback tend to be a lot less. So like, something you bought from the store or something that didn't show up that you bought online. And so, yeah, so that wasn't really, didn't make sense. Travel made sense, but travel was sort of waning as we got further away from the travel bookings that were before COVID. So anyway, sort of one of the theses we had all along was that we could actually create a tool that could prevent chargebacks from happening in the first place. And we also realized from talking to lots of banks and disputes teams and stuff as part of our journey that this was a problem that the banks and the card issuers were facing every day. So to answer your question, what am I doing now? I'm working at a company called resolved.ai. And we essentially creating a disputes API for card issuers or banks. And what that means is it means that you'd go into a transaction that you don't know what it is. So you'll be looking at your bank statement on your phone and you're going to see a transaction for $30 and you're going to, what the WTF is this? Which is something I think probably happens to people like once a month, I think. They just don't know. And then you go into that transaction and then we'll sell our software to the bank. So we'll put a little button on that transaction that says get help. And then they press on that button, sends a transaction to us, and then we essentially help you get a refund from the merchant or get it solved basically because we map out all the refund policies, rules, links, and all that kind of stuff for each individual merchant. And yeah, essentially help you sort it out with the merchant all online without having to call up your bank and create a chargeback or a dispute or something like that costs you a lot of time and them a lot of money. So yeah, that's where we're at. Early stage, got a proof of concept, and we're shopping it around to various banks around the world, trying to find our first customer. So that's the current gig.
Amazing, and I love that it's so informed. When you start the idea or when you build a product, that it comes from a real need that obviously resonates with people, and obviously you've done your research around it properly. And I think a lot of people in the startup space. That's kind of missing, and then they build the product and they wonder why it hasn't taken off. And I just, that's the businesses that I've seen and heard that you've built have really taken off. And I think that that research is a really critical part. And I'd love you to just, because I first met you actually through my parents and through my dad. So you were helping Dad distribute his product, Ultralift Australia, his audiovisual products in New Zealand, and that was, I think, your very first job, or one of your very first jobs that you did. And after that, you just developed, a series of different products. And I'd love you to just touch on the kind of the process of you starting was it the light bulb project?
Yep.
Light bulbs, and then after that, the geo-op, which. Yep. And also during the earthquakes in New Zealand, when you had it's something that you created to kind of coordinate volunteers to be more effective during that. So sorry, that's kind of like 3 or 4 questions.
Yeah, I was like tracking the first one and got the second. Okay, I think I got it. I'll actually start with what you just said about the last question. And so my message is that the CEO's job for an early stage startup is to measure demand. That's it. That's all your job is. You don't actually need to build a product or have anything. You can just have screenshots or just fake it. Like, that's your job, is to go out to the people who have the problem. Hey, like, do you really have a problem? Tell me more about the problem. And then you go back to them a little while later and go, hey, I've thought about it. I think I've got a solution. And you show them some mock-ups. Is there something you think would help solve the problem? And so you don't need a dev team. You don't need anything. You just need someone who can draw something in most cases, or a spreadsheet or whatever. So just on the first one, just as an early stage company founder, just your job is to prove demand, and that's it. And your investors, or if you need investors, will love you for it, because that's all they want to know as well. That's all anyone wants to know. So on to the next one. So you kind of, so basically, I think the question's like what was the early years like in this journey, I think, with all those different businesses. So my journey started, so the first job I ever had was at a stereo shop in Auckland whilst at university, part time. I think I did like maybe 20 hours a week kind of thing while I was studying. And yeah, it was pretty interesting. So this little shop was like, I don't know, maybe 300, maybe 200 square meters, maybe not even that, but it was doing over $1 million a month in sales. So it's sort of like doing Harvey Norman size sales, but in a floor area like a fifth the sort of maybe 10th the size. So yeah, so that was really, really insightful. And I definitely don't think I'm a classical salesperson, but I was a technical salesperson. So, what do you need? And okay, this is what you should get. And for the certain things that I'm interested in, I have a photographic memory, and for things that I'm not interested in, I'm just terrible. So I just can't remember anything unless if I'm interested in it, like cars, tech, then I can tell you whatever number or whatever it is you want to know. So anyway, from that, I was like 18 years old, and I had two bosses. One boss was let's just say he had a Hell's Angels thing up in his office, so we never know anyway. And then the other boss, he was a really, really good salesman, like really, really good salesman. That's definitely his talent. Like he could convince people to buy stuff. So anyway, he within a couple of months of my 18 at this job, he's like, Nick, we should go into business together. I'm like, okay, all right. Took it as a compliment. Anyway, Nick minute, as we say in New Zealand. I'm in business with my boss at that stereo shop and his old friend. So it was like a 19-year-old, 40-year-old, and this guy he brought in was a 60-year-old. So I was like, okay. And then literally next minute again, my boss is like, oh, I don't like the expenses that the other guy's putting through the system, through the business. I'm not happy with it. He's charging all this money, and then he's out of there. So next minute I'm in business with a 60-year-old. and I had every dollar I had gone into getting this business and everything else. So we had this business that we actually bought actually. So the first business associates we bought into, and I owned 20% of it. So kind of a minority position. But this was my first couple of years in business. And during this business, we were basically selling projector screens and AV accessories and stuff. And we had the Ultralift Australia distribution rights. So I wasn't really selling much of it. But anyway, built up a relationship with Steph's dad, Ken. Got him over to New Zealand, tried to convince him to jump off a bridge. Didn't do it. Maybe next time. He had a look. Showed him the bungee jumping. And anyway, we had a great time and built up a good relationship. So and then we managed to grow the sales of Ultralift in New Zealand. And so this is all very traditional. And just for context, we're talking like 2007, 2008, I think, kind of time period. It's like 2007-ish time period. And so even like a tech startup almost wasn't almost a thing. Like I never thought of anything that I was doing, even the subsequent e-commerce businesses, tech coming as sort of as a business. So anyway, in the end, that business taught me about everything that could kind of go wrong with a business. So my business partner, who I kind of inadvertently ended up was he was just uninformed, right? He didn't know the difference between directors and shareholders, and he didn't understand accounting, and he was a lovely people person and definitely had his talents, but he didn't. You see this a lot. You see this a lot with small business where people just don't get the basic principles, and that was kind of the situation. So in the end, I managed to exit the business through his incompetence, quite frankly, because I put my money in as a shareholder's loan, which is then repayable on demand, which he didn't know because he wasn't informed. So I managed to exit the business with what I put in. So I kind of got 2 years of like, oh God, this is what things look like. Business grew like 40% in sales, so it was actually doing okay. Anyway, managed to exit the business with all these lessons, but with what I put in. So it's kind of like a very valuable set of lessons without too much skin being lost. And I think it's been really, really helpful actually for the rest of my career to know what sort of things can happen in small businesses and how you need to manage partnerships carefully and so forth. So anyway, one of the things that I left to do was to set up the bulb business that Steph mentioned before. So that was called projectorbulbs.co.nz. And by this stage, I was nearly finished my studies. So this is all happening whilst I'm, supposed to be doing a BCom, BProp. Bachelor in Commerce, major in accounting, and a Bachelor of Property. So so I'm just about finished, and I've got out of this company. I've got the money I put in out, so all good. And what I could do is I could do what all my friends have done, and I could go get a job at like a big accounting firm, or maybe in some big corporate or whatever. I mean, that's everyone follows a path. I'd say broadly, my friends went and did the law thing, or they did the accounting thing at big top four firms, and that made sense to them for a bunch of reasons, and to me, it made no sense. And obviously that's one of the themes I think we can talk about today. It's like why that didn't seem to make sense to me. But it might be another question, so I'll try and keep to the question anyway. So I set up this website, Objective Bulbs, and I knew a bit about the market, but obviously didn't know everything. But nothing ventured, nothing gained. So went live. I know early 2009, perhaps. Yeah, I'll say early 2009, something like that. And in the first month was like 35K worth of sales. Right, we're talking e-commerce 2009. GFC, like not the best conditions in the world. Anyway, I did set up this business with a very specific purpose, and that was that it needed to be sellable. Needed to sell this business. This was going to be, started and sold, and it's going to be really attractive to lots of people for a bunch of reasons. So that was the purpose, and so that's what I did. So 18 months later, it was doing over 100,000 a month in sales, super profitable, and I basically realized that probably I'd make more money selling the business now than I would trading it for another few years, right? And not only that, but more money by selling it now and doing it again in Australia, to be more specific, was going to create the biggest possible outcome. Whereas I could have just stayed in New Zealand and made these profits, and its value would have gone up a little bit. I was like, no, onwards and upwards. So yeah, put on the market 18 months later. So this is mid 2010. And the business sold for, so I put it on the market at 450, and the agent was like, I don't know, like it's only 18 months old, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nah, this is just worth at least this. His first agent doesn't have much luck, brings in one person who wants to do an earn out. So when they pay you like some now and some later. And then I get another agent, and then he puts it out there. And next thing I know, I've got 5 people wanting to pay me full price. And I'm like, okay. So I kind of bit of warm starts, and it ends up selling for just under $500,000. So I guess 2010, I would have been 25. 25, and I've got $500,000 in my pocket, no debt. And that has given me the ability to wake up every morning for pretty much my entire career and decide what I'm going to do. And that was exactly what we're supposed to do. And and then of course there's 2 other businesses that were part of your question, but I'm going to stop talking. And if you want to ask me about those 2 or something else, then go for it.
Awesome. It's so fantastic the way you share that journey. Thanks, because it's it's so interesting to hear. I think like often we see people that are successful and see the end product and what they're doing, but not how they got there. So it's really interesting to hear your journey from the lessons you learnt in the first business to to building your own business. And so interesting to hear that you had in mind a really clear intention that you wanted to sell it at the end, so you would have built it according to that, setting up the systems and
and making it non-person to key person dependent. Like if you know that you're going to sell it, you build it in a way that you don't have to be there, and so it creates a discipline of doing systems and processes and software. And this all coincided with the cloud software, the early stages of cloud software, Xero, online CRMs. It even coincides with the launch of the iPhone 3G. So a lot of that ability to create like a business you can run from a laptop was only just becoming available at that time, and I jumped on that with all I had and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Unreal. I want to go back to asking you. It's so interesting to me why you said that it made no sense for you to go and get a traditional job in a corporate or something like that. Why does it make no sense to some people, and at that young age of around 25 or whatever you were at the time, and others just only see that as their pathway? So can you speak to that?
So it touches a couple of things. So I've got I've got one principle I think I've lived my life by mostly. Of course, I think it's almost impossible to do it completely. And that I had this idea that you should never sell your time. And that kind of relates heavily into this question. Why shouldn't you sell your time? You shouldn't sell your time because it's the only thing in the world that you've got a scarce amount of, right? Jeff Bezos got everything in the world. It's just as much time as the next guy his age, however old he is. So, there's an equality there. We've only got, that's the only truly scarce resource. You can always make more money. You can always make new friends. You can always do whatever, but you can only ever have so many seconds. So, so why sell the thing that's scarce, basically kind of underpins that. So in terms of this career path, I'll try and bring it back to, I don't want to be a universal answer because of course everyone is different, like you've just acknowledged, but I'll start from my perspective and then we'll try and look at it from other perspectives. So I came out, so I was finishing up, I came to this crossroads, right? Like I'd had this business experience that wasn't all great, but I managed to get out with my shirt still on. And I did interview for a job and got to the final interview of all companies, like Sell Your Soul, British and American Tobacco. That was an accounting job. But, I figured, no harm in the practice and, didn't know how it would go. But got to the final interview stage and they wanted me to do this presentation. So I did this presentation about why we should have capital gains tax. And then they came back to me with, sorry, you're too entrepreneurial. Do you want to look at this role over here? They're looking for someone more accounting, I think, for the role. And thank God they didn't take me, because if I'd got that job, I would have been working for British American Tobacco and I would have earned around about 50K that year, right? Anyway, so that was that. And obviously things were in the background with Projected Bulbs.co.nz, and that went live not long after. And the difference is just massive, right? Like if I literally had an income, you sort of have, some tax benefits, you can depreciate your car and things like that. So you get some perks in your phone bill, all that. But yeah, I went from, having a website that was doing 30K a year to 18 months later having $500,000 in my bank account, plus an income along the way and all the experience of building a business. Whereas if I'd gone down that professional route, I would become good at preparing accounts for large corporates, which is a useful skill that can make you money and eventually could support a pretty good lifestyle if you stick with it. But unfortunately, I really liken that lifestyle to climbing the pyramid, right? So if you joined a big four, like the big four accounting and law firms in New Zealand, at least, actually have a gentleman's agreement between themselves on what they pay first-year graduates. So they compete like hell to get the best people, but they can't compete on price, which is nuts. So they all get paid. I don't know what it is now, but back then they would have all started on about 38,000 for the brightest people from these degrees. And then of course they then get billed. So it's like $15 an hour. And then they get billed out for what, $200-300 an hour. But if they climb the pyramid to the top, one day they can be the guy, getting $500,000 an hour and billing out all these other people, right? So long as you're willing to basically talk about audits or tax or whatever for the rest of your life, right? Other people's tax and other people's money, right? Whatever. Yes, I'm not going to say it's all boring, but there would be I think everyone knows there'd be some monotony in that, or knowing everything about tax law is going to excite maybe some people. But yeah, you climb the pyramid and you reap the rewards. A lot of people jump off the pyramid and then become like a head of finance at a corporate. That could be definitely more, I think that could be more enjoyable. But ultimately, you're selling your time. Now, why the hell would you sell the one thing you've only got a certain amount of? And then that would segue into the other critical thing to, if you agree that selling your time is potentially foolish, then that's the next one is multiples. And I do genuinely believe that the understanding of multiples, and what I mean by multiples is revenue, kind of like company valuations. And if you understand that, that's the difference between rich people and poor people. If I had to kind of go with one thing that separates rich people from poor people. As an aside example, people are like, these billionaires, they've got all this money. It's like, if you want to be a billionaire right now, if you could just get a software company to 50 million in revenue and say somehow you own the whole thing, you probably would be a billionaire right now. If you can get a company to 50 million in revenue that's in tech, if it's got a decent growth rate, it'll be worth 20 times that. It'll be $1 billion company. So you could be a billionaire and actually have no money in the bank. You just got a company that you started, it's gone well, you solved a problem for the world, got it to 50 million revenue, multiples 20, is worth $1 billion. As another example, if you're great at accounting and you're like, I'm going to create a great accounting firm, and you get it to 50 million in revenue, which would be pretty bloody hard in this part of the world. But say you got there, guess what it's worth? It's worth 50 million. $1 billion versus 50 million for the same amount of revenue, right? So that's why understanding multiples is so important. In my case, the New Zealand multiples for small businesses, so like mum and dad type of businesses or first businesses, like so businesses worth like under a couple mil. It's funny, like it was even during the GFC, it was like 3, and here we are 10 years later with 1% interest rates, and guess what? It's still 3. So it's kind of the rest of the market's moved on to like much higher multiples. Just look at the stock market, these huge multiples or tech companies, but little mum dad businesses, they're still worth around 3. So I managed to sell my business, I think back then, for maybe a 4 or 5 multiple. But the point is that I did sell my time. I sold my time to my own company. My own company consumed my time, and my time was invested in my baby. My baby grew. My baby grew up to be an adult that someone else could live with, so to speak. But the whole time I was investing that time, every hour I put in got multiplied by 4 from a dollar's perspective, right? So why sell your time at a 1x multiple to a corporate when you can invest your time and get paid 4 times back, or if it's a tech company, potentially 20 times back on every dollar that you make? So my kind of contention was about why I didn't go down that path, of the accountant or whatever, the auditor or the tax person, is because it would be stupid. And I don't mean that disparagingly, so maybe I'll take that back. Not stupid, it would be nonsensical, in my opinion, nonsensical to do that. So for me, it wasn't being brave. It was just like, why would I? why would I do that? So now I'll try and come back and say, does this make sense for everybody? Well, clearly not, because there are people who are passionate about doing things like helping people medically, doctors or vets or things like this. So there are certainly professions where this doesn't apply. But then that said, I do know successful entrepreneurs who used to be doctors. So I would say that if you are in a profession where selling your time and doing it is kind of the only way, you actually gain some really valuable stuff. So like one guy that comes to mind, he's in the UK, and he's sold like 2 businesses now for like $20 million each. And he was a doctor for, 10, 20 years. And because of that experience in the medical system, he could see how poorly the operations were of a hospital. So basically, they'd have these operating theaters, and these operating theaters cost like $100,000 an hour or some crazy amount of money in costs. And because they're run by doctors who are not operations people or economists or accountants or whatever, they just wouldn't have any measurement or performance sort of profiles on these operating theaters. So he came up with a system where they basically like benchmark the theaters, they benchmark the doctors, they'd know how long certain procedures should take. And basically he can go into any hospital in the UK and save them like £10 million just by making them use what they had better. So I'd say in the areas where you have to sell your time, that the opportunity you end up with is you can find the problems and you can solve them. And in my particular career path where I haven't worked for a corporate, I miss a ton of opportunities because I'm not working in a big corporate or an industry like healthcare to find those problems that need fixing. That's my problem. I'd like to be exposed to the more problems I can be exposed to, the better. That my success is a function of the problems I can find. And I think I find problems by investing in other people's companies. Actually, is probably how I'd mostly solve it. So yeah, I'd say if you're interested in doing your own thing, which is really I think what this story is about, then you can still do it even if you're in a job where you have to start off and build your way up. And if doing that is what you love, and you can take care of yourself and your family, then obviously all the power to you, and there's no need to go off and set up a company. But I just want to point out that I think it's still a possibility. You just have to go to work, and every time you see something silly or weird or broken, you go, that's an opportunity. That's an opportunity that someone can fix, and that could be you. Yeah.
I love that. And I think, in listening to you, again, it's a lot of, when you're talking about selling your time, it's also freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of association, freedom over your time. And I think, what I'm hearing and what you're saying as well is it's who you become on the journey of creating your own business as well. It's kind of, I think it's an incredible way to throw yourself into self-development as well, because everything kind of rests on you and your own shoulders, and you have to, your success is up to you, and there's so many choices that you need to make along the way through the challenges and that sort of thing. And I remember you used to live in Melbourne with your beautiful partner Tamara, who's also my friend, and I miss you guys greatly being around. But I used to love chatting to you about business, and the evolution of what I was even doing with 7 Women. And there was a time, I think, when I was chatting to you about also, I had this perceived I perceived that I had a gap in my skills, and that because I'd never worked in a corporate, that I was missing these skills. I just kind of got that kind of idea in my mind, and I wanted to pursue that. So, but then I was kind of thinking, well, how do people, like the question that we're talking about before, how do people know straight out of high school they want to do this or they want to do this if they've never experienced it? Like that's the confusion I had coming out of high school. I was like, how do my friends know exactly what they want to become when they've never actually had that experience? So I got to a similar point when I'd been doing 7 Women, the charity, for about 10 years, and I thought, I want to evolve and I want to learn more, very hungry for learning. And I just thought maybe I should get a job in a corporate for a couple of years, or, to see if there are skills that I need to learn that I could bring back and create my new next thing. And so then I came up with this random idea of maybe I could just reach out to 4 different companies and ask if I could just shadow their executives for a week, just to see what they do, what is consulting, what is it like working for a Big 4, and so I was just reminded that in what you were saying about this kind of, to me, in my own opinion, this insane system where it's like you come in at the bottom of the pyramid and you work your way up through this hierarchy, and at what cost do you climb to the top? And I think there's a lot of stress and strain that's put on people because there are
and if you stop climbing, that can be it, right? It can be over. If you get off, if you don't run on the treadmill faster and faster, like if you stop, you don't get anything, right? You're on zero pay, and potentially you slide down the pyramid if you want to come back and try and get to the top again, right? So it's a slippery, faster pyramid, not just a normal one, right? That you climb.
Yeah. And it's, at the end of the day, it's this kind of promise, chasing the carrot type stuff, where you can, there's a lot of sacrifices that can be made to kind of get there. And that, so some of the stuff that you were just sharing, was my experience when I had time in these, consulting firms, and it was so interesting, but I learnt so much. I learnt so much from being there, and they were all so different in what they do, and I'm so grateful for the owners of the businesses that let me shadow their staff members for those weeks, because it just gave me an insight into, and the realization that I had was, oh my God, I have done this stuff, but I just didn't have the buzzwords. And the buzzwords made me feel like I didn't know that whole set of skills. But actually, you do learn that through doing your own business. You have to be able to succeed and get traction. So, so super interesting. And I love the kind of expression. It's who you become on the journey. So ideally, choosing to create your own business is choosing your own path, because you have more control over who you do business with, how you do business, and to make it ethical as well.
But I'd say that the other, like, this absolutely critical thing as well, it's like your key message is, I think just about all people who are successful at doing that, they don't know what's going to happen. And I think that's what separates a lot of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, is that the entrepreneurs spend so much time trying to plan out the perfect idea, the perfect path, the perfect journey, the perfect this, and honestly, just couldn't disagree more. It's about just doing it, just getting started. And I mentioned this Get a Cut business that we started during lockdown. That was just, didn't have much to do. I'm like, okay, the world's going to change. I was jumping on Google Trends. I'm like, okay, let's see what people like, what's going up, what people need. Dropped in some ideas. Oh, yeah, cool. Hair clippers. Yeah, you can get those locally. Finger suppliers. Literally, the site went live in 2 days. The name came out with a name like in 5 seconds. Came up with the website was just the default Shopify theme, no customizations. The logo was made in a logo maker in 5 minutes. It was just like, is this idea any good? Well, the only way to find out is to do it. There's no other way to find out. You can't find out if it's a good or bad idea by not doing it or talking about it. Like, okay, talking about it can be research to validate, but essentially until you go live, you don't know exactly how it's going to go. So anyway, the point is it went live in 48 hours, right? Just boom. And then it went on to do, I think, about $250,000 worth of sales in New Zealand in its first 2 months. So imagine if I go, nah, it's a shit idea. Nah, won't do it. I'll work on something else. Let me spend 6 months preparing something. So I do think that the key thing is just to get on the journey and you just take it as it comes. And that's what I think all entrepreneurs fundamentally do. They're okay, be comfortable with taking on the unknown, because going into the unknown is where you make the new discoveries. You don't learn anything by just sitting on the fence.
Yeah, that appetite and for risk, and to just kind of back yourself and go for it. Which
well, except by getting on with it, you are de-risking everything. So it is an appetite for risk, and I think that's how we would frame it. But it's risky. The most risky thing is to do nothing.
Oh, I like that. That's a good one. Yeah,
it is.
If you're taking action, I mean, in the action, you're learning and you're evolving and you're tweaking.
Yeah.
And
exactly, and you're finding out if people want it, whether or not you've built the product or have the product available or not. So maybe you'll find out some stuff and you go, shit, glad I didn't make that thing. Save yourself a year of planning some Kickstarter or whatever it is. The risk, and then of course, if you never launch any idea, and then I would say the risk is that you're employed your whole life. And if you're employed your whole life, nothing wrong with that. But as soon as you're unemployed, you earn zero. Right. Whereas if you work on it, if you build it, if you invest the same amount of time into your own business, it's probably going to produce money to fund your life if you're not there, and it's sellable. So everything you put into it can be realized. Now you just the way that people in employment do it is they become consultants, and then they sell their IP. They sell their time and their IP to people back at an hourly rate, which I think is not the same as having a business that you can go, say it says 100,000 in profit that you then put on the market for $400,000, or it makes 100,000 every year if you keep it. There's just no comparison, I think, in terms of the overall risk. For me, I'm just like completely polar opposite. Everyone, I'm like, that employment thing, that's the risky one. Doing nothing, that's risky. So I guess you could say I have a very different relationship with risk than most people.
Well, I love that. Reminds me of this quote that I saw once, and it's kind of stuck with me. Act on your highest excitement with no expectation of the outcome. I love that.
Absolutely. 100%, 120%.
So thank you so much. It's been awesome, and I can't wait to share this with the listeners.
Hey, thanks so much, Steph. It's been really fun.
Thanks for listening to our Inspiring Humans podcast, and I hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any inspiring human in mind that you would like to nominate, please reach out and let us know. Also, you're very welcome to become part of our Facebook group called Inspiring Humans, where you can connect with incredible people from around the globe. Thirdly, if you are interested in being part of a global network, we have an incredible community at 7continentscouncil.com, where we hold events, programs, and many different initiatives that you can be involved in. Thank you, and see you again soon.